Hello aspirants and welcome again to Legacy IAS Academy. So in this live session, we will be discussing the budget which was just a while ago presented by our Honorable Finance Minister, that's Nirmala Sitharaman. So in this session, we will be decoding the entire budget for you. We'll be looking at all the key highlights that were presented. Now, before the budget is released, of course, there are certain expectations from different sections of the economy with respect to the provisions in the budget. So we will see what kind of expectations did the budget have, and did the budget actually meet the expectation or not, and what are the important things in it. Is it a good budget? What does it mean for India in the coming financial year? So on and so forth. So let's get started. The three most important things over here to cover is first to understand what is the union budget, right? And under what provision is the budget presented. We'll see that. Then we move on to 5 very interesting facts about the budget. At times UPSC has a knack of asking very trivial questions but quite interesting questions with respect to factual things about the important document, and union budget being one of them. We'll see those interesting facts about it, and then comes the major part of this session, that is the key highlights of the budget 26-27. So let's get started with the very first thing as to what is the union budget. So if I ask you a question that whether the budget word has been mentioned or in the Indian Constitution or not. So we may tend to think that yes, if we are talking about budget being presented every year and is being such a significant thing, then definitely it would have been mentioned, but that is incorrect. In fact, the word budget has nowhere been used in the Indian Constitution at all. Then why are we presenting that? Of course, even certain things, if they are not mentioned in the Constitution, they are still done. They may have certain laws and acts that are backing it. But here the thing is, the document that we call as budget, now though this word is not used in the Indian Constitution, the Constitution does use a different word to represent budget, and that word is the annual financial statement. Yes. So the thing that we commonly know as budget is actually the annual financial statement, which is mentioned in Article 112 of the Indian Constitution. So this makes a direct question for your prelims. So it's mentioned in the Article 112. Now, as we have seen for the economic survey, the ministry and the department that is responsible for economic survey is exactly the same ministry and department responsible for the union budget. So it is prepared by the budget division of the Department of Economic Affairs. Under which ministry? The Finance Ministry, right? Now, a very interesting thing about this budget. So we all know that it is our finance minister, that is the union finance minister. Union means the central government's finance minister basically. So it's the union finance minister that, just focus on the word, that presents the budget. That's correct. However, if you talk about who causes the budget to be laid in both the houses of the parliament, then that's not the finance minister, that is the President of India. In fact, in 2024, there was a question on this, and UPSC have actually given a wrong answer for this in their answer key. Yes, if you don't believe it, check it out after the session. So we know that it's the president who causes the budget to be laid before both the houses of the parliament, and it is the finance minister, in this case Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, who will be the union finance minister, of course, who has presented the budget. So now let's move on to the 5 interesting things that I was talking to you about the budget. So if you talk about the budget, you see over here she's carrying a file kind of a thing which is known as Bahi Khata. Basically, Khata is meaning account. So in the early days, traditionally, the Indians, when used to keep accounts of certain things, we used to carry in a cotton textile cloth like a file in which the documents used to be there. And that is exactly what she is carrying over here, which is known as the Bahi Khata. But was this the thing which used to carry the budget all the time? Absolutely not. During the British period, we had the briefcase made of leather which they used to carry. And this colonial legacy kept on continuing in India as well, after independence as well. However, recently it has been changed, and now instead of carrying this briefcase, what is carried is this Bahi Khata, which is traditional. So we have stopped the colonial hangover here, and we have started using what traditionally we Indians used to use for keeping the accounts. Next thing is something known as the blue sheet. Now we know about the budget speech, the budget highlights, so on and so forth. But in this briefcase, there is also a sheet known as blue sheet. Now this blue sheet is said to be quite sacred and quite secret. In fact, so secret that it does not get out of the North Block where Ministry of Finance is there. It is kept there from the beginning till the end. It does not get out of that premises itself. So what is this blue sheet? This blue sheet is basically the master summary of the budget. It is, remember, it's a single piece of paper, a single sheet in which all the important numbers are there. That is what the blue sheet is all about. Then the third interesting thing is the time of presentation of budget. So during the British rule, when we were under the colonial rule, the budget was presented at 5 p.m. Now, why are we presenting budget at 5 p.m. late in the evening? Because we were syncing, Indians, or at that time during the British rule, we were syncing our time with the time of Britain. Now, since Britain is 4.5, or you can say at times when daylight saving time concept is used, so 4.5 or 5.5 hours behind. So when you're talking 5 p.m. here, it's 11:30 p.m., 11:30 a.m. in Britain. So we used to have our budget at 5 p.m. Now that was all right when it was the colonial rule, but we got independence. This should have changed, but this did not change. It kept on being like 5 p.m. for a long period of time, subsequent to which since 1999 we changed the time and made it to 11 a.m. as what happened today. Our finance minister presented the budget at 11 a.m. Now the next important thing, I don't know how many of you already know it. So there are two things on this slide. One is the halwa ceremony. So halwa, basically it's a sweet dish, of course. So it's the sweet dish signifying the initiation of the process of presenting the economic survey and then the budget, majorly the budget. So whenever you do something good, whenever you are about to do a very big job which is very important, of course you start by basically having something sweet. Like today, our finance minister was also fed with the curd and sugar, which is said to be auspicious and also have scientific reasons as to have it before you are taking up a big task. So keeping that in mind, halwa ceremony is conducted few days before the budget, and it has another significance. The other significance is the fact that all the officials who are involved in the preparation of the budget, they are actually locked in. Yes, you heard that right. They are actually locked in the basement of the North Block of the Ministry of Finance. Why they are locked in is because the information with respect to the budget should not go out in the public domain before the budget is actually presented by the finance minister. So few days before, when the ceremony takes place, it also marks the initiation of the locking in of the officials who have made this particular budget. Now when they are locked up, in the sense that it's not a punishment for them. Of course, they are provided a proper place and things and amenities to live, but of course they are detached from the external society. There is no access to the internet, to the mobile, etc. Of course, but in case of emergency, their families can reach out to them by sending messages at a dedicated number, but no direct communication as such is also allowed. So this is how important it is. And the last thing is about certain records of the longest and the shortest speeches. So if you talk about the longest speech, the record is held by our present finance minister herself, when in 2020 she gave a speech of about 2 hours 42 minutes. Some data says 42 or 39. So but she is the one with the longest speech. If you talk about most words, it was said by Dr. Manmohan Singh, 18,650, but still he does not hold the record of longest speech. So he said more words in less time. Then you have the shortest speech, which took place in 1977, just 800 words by Hirubhai M. Patel. Now, why this is the case? In 1977, the Janta government came to power. It was and he acted as an interim finance minister. So he simply talked about the important points and that was it. But these are the facts in front of you. Now, before we move ahead to the most important section of this live session, that is the key highlights, one thing we need to see that every year, whenever the budget is presented, the government emphasizes on certain things or talks about a generic comprehensive approach that the government has taken. So here also our Honorable Finance Minister has mentioned that this budget, so whatever the government, which is of course led by our Honorable Prime Minister, they have chosen one thing over the other. So let us see what is that. So she says we have chosen action over ambivalence. Right? We want to act rather than being confused with respect to two different things. We would rather act and avoid red tapeism. Number two, reform over rhetoric. Reform means actually bringing out some important changes or improvements rather than rhetoric. Rhetoric means just keep on saying but not do anything. So what we will do, we will reform rather than just keep on talking about rhetorics. And people over populism, very important for a democratic country. In a democratic country, since elections are there, so you need to appease the people. It is about popularity, it is about gaining the majority. But the government is saying we will focus on people over populism. That means they are indicating that even if certain decisions may not be popular decisions, may not be liked by the people in general, but if that is right for our people, we will take those decisions, is what is being said. Now remember, these quotes, these phrases, etc., you can directly use in your essays, in your answers, where, as and when they are required. So this is the approach that the government has taken. So now let us get started with respect to the key highlights of the budget. Now this budget, the government is saying that this budget is driven by Yuva Shakti. So it's a Yuva Shakti driven budget. Yuva means of course young and Shakti means power. So here this budget is being driven by the power of the youth. So here Yuva basically will be youth. So it is driven by the power of the youth. Now this power of the youth is basically the driver of this budget. But the approach that the government has taken, the government talks about 3 kartavyas. The government says that it has 3 kartavyas. Kartavya means duty. Right, duty. So 3 kartavya basically means 3 duties. 3 duties that are present. And what are these 3 duties? Let us have a look. See, these things can be asked directly in the examination prelims. If not, you can use them in your answer writings. Very important. So first kartavya is accelerate and sustain the economic growth. So what we are looking for? We are looking for a higher growth rate. As the economic survey said that we would be growing at 6.8 to 7.2%. In fact, not just that, we are aspiring for double-digit growth. And not just aspiring and achieving once, we want to sustain that growth. So that is the duty of the government and specifically of the budget. Then next you have fulfill aspirations of our people, right? People have aspirations, people have needs, desires, but needs is slightly different. Needs is basically the basic needs that you talk about, but aspirations is basically the desire. You aspire, you aspire to become civil servants. That's your aspiration, right? So people of the country have different aspirations, and it is the responsibility of the government to fulfill those aspirations, is what the government is saying. And then the third kartavya. In fact, the third kartavya is nothing but what the government slogan was since the beginning of their first term in 2014 itself, and that was Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Sabka means, of course, everyone. So Sabka Saath means the support of everyone. Vikas means development, so it is development for everyone. And when you talk about development for everyone, you are talking about inclusive development. That means no one should be left out from experiencing this particular development. So third kartavya is Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas. However, you should also know that after saying Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas, the government added certain things on it and said Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. Vishwas means trust, and Sabka Prayas. Prayas means effort. So the present slogan or the motto of the government reads Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, and Sabka Prayas. Right? Then, as I mentioned, that we are talking about higher growth rate. So we are talking about a growth rate of around 7% and more in the next fiscal year, 6.8 to 7.2%, and we have to further increase and sustain that. Now, if we are able to do that, there are going to be certain things that we need to do, and once we achieve the growth, we will be able to get certain benefits out of it, right? So how are we going to achieve this? We will have to come up with far-reaching structural reforms. That is one thing the government talks about. Structural reforms means just by changing the percentages of taxation, etc., is not going to work. You have to structurally change the economy. We need to facilitate the people to basically do business, improve the ease of doing business, right? Enhance things, change the structure of the economy, increase more people in the tax net, so on and so forth. Fiscal prudence. We are aspiring for fiscal prudence. Going forward, we'll discuss this in detail. Fiscal prudence means, of course, you have expenditure and you have the receipt. Expenditure minus receipt is the deficit, means the shortfall. The government is aspiring that this shortfall should reduce, right? That is what we are aspiring for. Monetary stability. The exchange rate, for example, of the Indian rupee should not be quite volatile. There should not be very high inflation in the economy. So the monetary stability needs to be there. The stability of the Indian rupee and the exchange rate system. Strong thrust on public investment. That means investing a lot on public development, specifically the capital expenditure. We will see that as well. Citizens benefit from government actions, ensuring that the citizens benefit from the government actions. Reduce critical import dependence. Very important. We are still dependent on imports. Our imports of goods is higher than our exports of goods. So we need to reduce that dependency. We need to ensure our energy security, and we need to enhance our domestic capacity, manufacturing capacity. And if we do that, we are going to be on path of achieving this, right? So let us see what are the pillars of growth and development the budget talks about. See, in your exam, in mains, there can be direct questions with respect to discuss the pillars of growth and development. So you can take the list directly from here and discuss them. So let us see what the government is talking about. First is sustaining economic growth. Means it should not be the case wherein you achieve 7% growth, but then subsequent years, the growth goes down. That should not happen. Right? The growth needs to be sustained for a longer period of time. Next, strengthening the foundations of the growth. What are the foundations on which the economy is there? As we talked about, monetary stability. Then you have various macroeconomic factors. For example, the inflation rate, the exchange rate, all those things should be strong for India. Next is people-centric development. So the development that takes place needs to be people-centric. That means the first and foremost provision, or the first and foremost reasoning should be the betterment of the people. Then you have trust-based government or governance. This is quite important, and the government is actually taking certain steps to have trust-based governance. Now, at many places you will find simply self-declaration that is required, right, for any particular scheme, whether if you are in the beneficiary list or not with respect to income, XYZ thing. There are certain schemes in which you can simply give self-declaration saying that yes, I fall under this, and that self-declaration will be accepted by the government. So what is this? This is nothing but trust-based governance. Not just that, in the coming slides we will see how in this budget also there is a provision for trust-based governance that the government has come up with. Then you have ease of doing business, which we would have heard previously as well. World Bank used to bring out the ease of doing business report, which it discontinued because of allegations of corruption on World Bank. Right now, that ease of doing business report has now been changed with Be Ready Index. Be Ready means Business Ready Index. So remember that. But here the government is not just talking about ease of doing business. The government is also saying we will ensure ease of living. So what has the government done in this budget to ensure ease of living? So we'll see that as well. But to tell you in brief, what the government has done is, now when you import certain things for your personal requirement, not for businesses, but for your personal use. If you are importing certain things for your personal use, so now those things that are having custom duty of 20%, the government is lowering the custom duty to just 10%. So what will this do? This will ensure that we have easier experiences of living. We will have to spend less amount of money for our personal lifestyle. So this is what is included in the budget. And the last point is fiscal matters. Here the government is trying to ensure that there is proper fiscal prudence. Our fiscal deficit is under control, and the other deficits also, which we will see going forward, they need to be controlled, and the government is focusing on that. And the numbers are actually indicating that in fact we are doing well with respect to the fiscal deficit and other deficit indicators as compared to the previous year, and it is estimated that we are going to do better in the coming year as well. So let us now start seeing each and every sector. So first let's talk about the financial sector. So in financial sector, of course, you have the banks, you have the money market, capital market. This entirely is your financial sector. So what has the government come up for the financial sector? The government is saying that it will form a high level committee. So a high level committee will be formed for banking. So what will that do? That high level committee is going to review the entire banking system of India, and then of course come out with its recommendation as to what is going well, what is not going well, what needs to be done, so on and so forth. Now, if you look at in the financial sector, there are certain tax changes that has taken place, which you can say may not be a good news for people who deal in the securities, right? So let us see what are those changes. So basically you have a concept of securities transaction tax. Now what are securities? For example, your shares are securities. In futures, your futures commodity market, wherein you buy and sell the instruments which has underlying commodity as the value. The value of that instrument is linked with the underlying commodity, and there are securities which you trade in the future. So two things here. One is the futures, the securities transaction tax on the futures. So when you are dealing in the futures, the government of course has a security transaction tax, that every time you trade, Every time you trade means either you buy it or you sell it. That is trading, right? Generally what happens, our corporate tax, for example, is applicable when we make a profit. But the securities transaction tax is applicable simply if you buy a security or sell a security. Now, interestingly, even if you make loss while selling off the security, the STT, that is securities transaction tax, will still be applicable on you. Now, that securities transaction tax for the futures was presently 0.02%. Now it has been increased to 0.04%. Now the same securities transaction tax for the options premium, right, and the exercise of options, now which was previously 0.1%, has now been raised to 0.15%. So remember, the securities transaction tax has been increased for both futures as well as for the options. Now the question may come in your mind, why do have security transaction tax? That too when I'm making a loss. The government charges security transaction tax on you in order to ensure that there is no speculative activity or speculative trading. What is this speculative trading? See, many people do intraday trading also. Their trading frequency is very high. What they want to do is, they don't want to invest in the fundamentals of the company. They simply realize that every day the chart is going up, down, there is a lot of frequency changes or fluctuations. So they try to put money when the chart is down and sell it off when the chart is up on the same day, right? So are you investing in the fundamentals of the company? No, you are simply playing on that fluctuation. So these kind of speculative buying and selling, the government wants to avoid. The government wants to curtail. That is why the government imposes securities transaction tax, so that if you are buying and selling multiple times in a day, multiple times that tax will be applicable on you. Now, if someone is actually investing for a long term and understanding the fundamentals of the company and then investing, they would be there in it for a longer duration, of course. Right? So over a period of 6 months, a year, or even 2-3 years, they might buy it once and sell it once. So at that moment of time, it will not be much. But if you are buying in a day and selling in a day, over a period of 365 days, you will have hundreds of transactions. And that is why this acts as a penalizing tax for people who do speculative trading. Right? Let's move ahead. Now, talking about strengthening the foundation of growth. Now, whenever we talk about growth, we are talking about the growth or the increase in the GDP, that is gross domestic product. Now, this gross domestic product is based on the foundation of infrastructure. Infrastructure is the biggest foundation for the growth of GDP. Now, how is that possible? Because any type of construction, any type of, in fact, production requires infrastructure. If it's a service sector, you require infrastructure. If it is agriculture sector, you require infrastructure. If it is industrial sector, you still require infrastructure. In services, your transportation is a part of service sector. So you require roads, dedicated freight corridors, railway networks, airports, airstrips, etc. So everything requires infrastructure, as a result of which it acts as a foundation for our growth. And what has the government done? The government has increased the capital expenditure. Capital expenditure is that expenditure that is done on capital goods. So infrastructure being one of them. So if you look at the graph here that has been given in the highlights of the budget by the government, there was in 2015, in financial year 2015, or you can say 14-15, the public capex means capital expenditure, was only 2 lakh crore. Now this capital expenditure has increased to 12.2 lakh crores. That means it has become more than 6 times. So there is a clear focus of the government for doing capital expenditure. Right. Next, the budget talks about urbanization, wherein it talks about city economic regions. So the government will come up with the city economic regions specifically focused in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. It is a very good initiative if it ends up being implemented well. Why it is good? Let us understand. So here the government basically talks about tier 2 and tier 3 cities, right? Tier 2 and tier 3 cities are basically smaller cities, less developed cities. They are of course different from tier 1 cities or mega cities, metro cities, mega cities that will be there. Cities like Bengaluru, Mumbai, they are mega cities. Now these mega cities are densely populated, right? It's densely populated. Why it's densely populated? Because the opportunities are concentrated in these regions. And why people are also migrating from everywhere to these kind of cities? Because there is no development elsewhere. Rural India is not developing, tier 2, tier 3 cities are not developing, so people are migrating. It leads to further different issues as well. So what the government is now trying to do is trying to develop tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Now when these cities develop, you will have big opportunities in these cities itself. So as a result of which there will be less attraction for the mega cities. So the pressure on the mega cities will also reduce. So this is a good approach of the government. Now, so as I said, focus on tier 2 and tier 3 cities as well as of course temple towns. Now, another thing that the government is going to do over here is have 7 high-speed rail corridors. 7 high-speed rail corridors. Bengaluru is at the center of it because a lot of them are linked to Bengaluru. So let us see what 7 are there. One is Mumbai-Pune. The other is Pune to Hyderabad. Then you have Hyderabad to Bengaluru. Then you have Hyderabad to Chennai. In fact, Hyderabad also is very prominent. Then you have Chennai to Bengaluru. Then Delhi to Varanasi and Varanasi to Siliguri. Right. So here we are talking about the high-speed rail. Now remember, in the budget speech, these things, these new schemes that will come up or these new projects that will come up, these are announced. And some places the government would give macro level of allocation. The details of it will keep on coming in this coming financial year, right? Let's move ahead. Fiscal matters. As I said, through the fiscal matters concept, the government is trying to ensure that we have fiscal prudence. Fiscal prudence, simply understand that we should not have much debt. Right? We should not be borrowing much. We should not be creating much debt for ourselves. That is the entire concept. So let us see, are we on the right track or not? So if we look at this, our debt scenario of the government, the deficit scenario, let's have a look at this first. So you have the fiscal deficit, primary deficit, effective revenue deficit and revenue deficit. So we need to understand these concepts. Now, if you talk about the revenue deficit, so let me explain you another concept of budget deficit first. So budget deficit means what? The total expenditure minus the total revenue gives you the budget deficit. Total expenditure minus total revenue gives you budget deficit, right? But it is not a good indicator with respect to the fiscal situation of the country. Why it is not a good indicator? Because this total expenditure is fine, that's not a problem. This total revenue receipt, or you can say total receipt, this total receipt consists of those receipts which are loans. So when loans are also included in the receipt, it will not give you a good indicator. That is one thing. So what you have to do is, those loans you have to not consider, right? Those loans are basically debt creating capital receipt. This total receipt is actually revenue receipt plus capital receipt. Now this capital receipt is nothing but debt creating capital receipt plus non-debt creating capital receipt. So we should not be taking debt creating capital receipt into consideration. Why? Because loan we have to pay back. Imagine a situation for your household, you need 1 lakh rupees, your income is only 75,000, so you keep on taking 25,000 loan. So you will feel there is no budget deficit. But the issue is 25,000 is the loan that you have taken. So you need to ensure that you don't include the loan that you are taking. So when you adjust for the loan that you are taking, you get the concept of fiscal deficit. So what is fiscal deficit? Total expenditure remains the same. It is total expenditure minus, instead of total receipt, you have revenue receipt plus non-debt creating capital receipt. So this is your fiscal deficit. This is very important. So remember, if you have taken even 1 rupee of loan, fiscal deficit is going to be higher than the budget deficit. Fiscal deficit and budget deficit will be equal only if there is no loan taken by the government. So this is what fiscal deficit is. I have explained this. Now let's talk about the other one, that is the primary deficit. Now what happens is, this year the government may not have taken loan, but the government would have taken loan previous years. So to pay off that loan, the government would be paying a huge amount of interest also. So because interest is also taken here as an expenditure, it will not give a good picture of the present health of the government, because there can be a huge burden from the past. So to understand the present situation or health of the government or the economy of India right now, we need to subtract the interest payment burden for the loans of the past. So what we get here is, primary deficit is basically fiscal deficit minus the interest payment. So you can clearly see primary deficit will be less than the fiscal deficit. It will be equal to fiscal deficit only if the interest payment is zero. But interest payment for government is not zero. Interest payment, in fact, is the highest component of expenditure for the government, which is mentioned in the budget. Okay, so this is your primary deficit. We have seen this also. As I said, you can see the primary deficit has been always lower than the fiscal deficit. It is but obvious. Then you have the concept of revenue deficit. What is this revenue deficit? Now, budget deficit was total expenditure minus total receipt. So your revenue deficit will be revenue expenditure minus revenue receipt. So here you take into consideration only that expenditure which is revenue expenditure, and only that receipt which is revenue receipt. But there is another component or another concept of effective revenue deficit. Let's see what is effective revenue deficit. See, in revenue deficit, what is happening? It's revenue expenditure minus revenue receipt. Now here, this revenue expenditure includes one component, that is grants in aid to the states. Now, from the grants in aid to the states, a part of that grant, the state government will be using to create capital, doing capital expenditure, to create asset. So that grant in aid given to the state government might be used by the state government as capital expenditure. So ultimately in the country, that money is going for capital expenditure, not revenue expenditure. So you need to subtract that amount. So that is why your effective revenue deficit will be the revenue deficit minus grants in aid given to the state, which is used for capital expenditure. As a result of which, effective revenue deficit will be less than revenue deficit. These two will be equal only when this is zero, or else this will always be less than this. I hope all the concepts are clear now. So now let us see how the trend has been for the country with respect to deficit. So if you look at fiscal deficit, this fiscal deficit has basically grown. You can see from 4.6 to 9.2%. Now, why such high deficits? Because this was the COVID period. The impact of COVID can be clearly seen over here. But after that, the government has done well. The economy has done well. From 9.2, it came down to 6.7, 6.5, 5.5, 4.8, 4.4. And so this estimate the revised estimate is basically saying that it will be about 4.4. Why not the actuals are out yet? Because we are still in February. The actuals will come out after 31st of March. But as of now, the revised estimates say that our fiscal deficit will be 4.4%. Right. Now this 4.4% of what? Of budget? No. This is 4.5% of GDP. Right. Now what is this 4.3? This is what the budget is estimating for the coming fiscal year, that is 2026-27. The budget says that it will further reduce to 4.3. So this is going to further go down to 4.3%. But remember, we are doing well, we are improving on this, we are going to be at 4.4 and it is going to further go down, but according to FRBM Act, it needs to be 3% of GDP. So we are still way above the FRBM Act's numbers. What is FRBM Act? It is the Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act, which sets the targets for fiscal deficit and effective revenue deficit. When it first came into picture in 2003, it set the target for fiscal deficit and revenue deficit. But then that act got amended and now it sets the target for fiscal deficit and effective revenue deficit. I hope that's clear. Let's move on to the next one. So we have seen the fiscal deficit. Now let's see the primary deficit. So primary deficit is what? It is fiscal deficit minus interest payment. So what has happened to it? This increased during COVID, but again, this has also consistently reduced. Presently, it's 0.8 and then it is going to be 0.7 in the next fiscal. If you talk about revenue deficit, it has also been high during the COVID period, but subsequently it has seen a decline, which is 1.5 now. Next year also it is estimated to be the same. If you look at the effective revenue deficit, which is what? Revenue deficit minus grants given to the state, which is used for capital expenditure. So this effective revenue deficit will be less than the revenue deficit. Let us see it. So you have the effective revenue deficit, which is the green one. So if you look at the green one, it is of course lower than the blue one. It's has been lower, and now it's going to be 0.6, and next year it's going to further reduce to 0.3. So you can clearly see that there is fiscal prudence which is being maintained by the government over here. So government is focusing a lot on this. I hope that's clear. Let's move ahead. Now this is really very interesting. Every year the budget comes up with two pictures of 1 rupee coin. This 1 rupee represents now they have in budget document there will be this 1 rupee that would be made. This 1 rupee represents the entire 100%. Okay. So in these two pictures, one picture tells us where does the rupee come from. The first picture tells us where does the rupee come from, and the second picture is going to tell us where the rupee goes. As you can see, it will tell us where the rupee goes. So any guesses where the highest amount of money is coming to the government of India for its budget expenses? Let us see that. So the rankings have not changed. Percentages are slightly different, but rankings as such are almost the same. Yes. So first, the biggest source of money is borrowings and liabilities. Now it's not that good thing to have borrowings and liabilities as the biggest source. That means, so 24% is the borrowings and liabilities. That means if for your, consider it your household budget. If in your household budget you are spending every year, every month you are estimating 1 lakh rupees of expenditure, 24,000 rupees is you borrowing from someone. So it is not good. But it is still good. Why it is good? Because as compared to the other countries, our debt to GDP ratio is quite less as compared to the other countries, which we will see in the coming slides. But right now remember, borrowings and liabilities together constitute the highest source of income. But it's not income as such, source of money. This is, you can say, because we will have to give this particular thing back. I hope that's clear. We have to return it. It's a liability on the government, right? Then you have the next biggest source, that is the income tax. So there's a lot of hue and cry that very less people pay the income tax, but you can see still the income tax is higher than the corporate tax. The taxes the big multinationals that are paying. You have Reliance, you have Ambani's, Adani's, their companies basically combined together, all the businesses, all the corporates combined together are paying less as compared to the income tax that is there, of course. But of course, still, having said that, the tax net for in India is still for the direct taxes quite small, because still it is estimated that a lot of people actually evade taxes. Be it the corporations, be it the individuals, people are evading taxes. That is a fact. So if we are actual nationalists, patriots, and if we actually love our country, we should actually ensure that we pay our fair share of taxes that we are liable to pay. That is true patriotism. Let's move ahead. So corporation tax is basically the third ranked over here. Then you have GST and other taxes. GST and other taxes, basically you're talking about the indirect taxes. And income tax and corporation tax are what? They are direct taxes. What are direct taxes? Indirect taxes, the person who's liable to pay is the one who pays. The person who's cut is the one who bleeds. But in indirect taxes, what happens? Liability is on one person, but someone else pays. For example, indirect tax, that is GST, right? So you buy, let's say, a Pepsi bottle, or you go in a restaurant to have something. So you are paying GST on that, 5% GST, right? Now, when you are paying GST on that, then what happens? Then what happens is, you are the one paying to the restaurant, but the restaurant owner is the one filing and giving it to the government. So who was actually required to pay? The restaurant owner, under whose name the restaurant is registered. That person was required to pay, but that person transferred the liability onto us and we end up paying. So the person who's cut is not the one who bleeds. The person who's cut is the restaurant owner, but we are the one who's bleeding. So that is why it is known as indirect taxes. Now remember, direct taxes are progressive in nature, whereas indirect taxes are regressive in nature. Progressive in nature means the taxes which give higher burden on people who are earning more and lesser burden on people who are earning less is progressive in nature. Regressive tax means the taxes which put more burden on person who's earning less and less burden on the person who's earning more are indirect tax, are regressive taxes, and indirect taxes are sort of regressive in nature. Then you have the non-tax revenue. Non-tax revenue as in your registration fees, penalties, fines, etc. The fees for getting certain services from the government, all those things that you pay are your non-tax revenue, right? Plus also in non-tax revenue will be included the profits and all that is earned by the public sector enterprises, the public sector units, the mini ratnas, navaratnas, maharatnas and other companies who earn those profits. Then you have the union excise duties, then the customs that you talk about for the imports, and then non-debt creating capital receipts, non-debt capital receipts. For example, when you basically sell off the public sector enterprise or basically dilute your ownership in that, so basically you are selling it off, you will get some money, that is non-debt creating, but remember, it lowers your asset. Okay, let's move ahead. Now let us see, where does the money actually go? We have seen where it comes from. Let us now see where it actually goes to. So if you look at where it goes to, the most important, in fact, here the ranking you can say is slightly different. So first is the state's share of the taxes. The Finance Commission talks about giving the share to the states. So it's the state's share. If in addition to that we look at it this, which is a very worrying thing for India. Interest payment. We are not even talking about paying off the principal amount of the loan. We are simply talking about the interest on the loan that we have taken itself is 20%. So if you are earning 100 rupees, 20 rupees you are paying only as interest payment. So this is considerably high. Then you have central sector scheme, defense and centrally sponsored scheme. What is the difference between central sector scheme and centrally sponsored scheme? Central sector scheme is a scheme in which the entire money is provided by the government of India, whereas centrally sponsored scheme is that scheme in which the money is provided by the government of India plus the respective states that are there. And that finance commission part is finance commission and other transfers that are done to the states, plus you have the major subsidies that are provided, the National Food Security Act, the minimum support price, so on and so forth, which are the major subsidies that is provided by the government of India, constitutes around 6%. And this you have civil pensions that are given by the government 2%, and other expenditure, they will be quite minuscule, so it has been clubbed together. Things to remember is this, the interest payment, plus you can also remember central sector scheme and centrally sponsored scheme. And also remember, these major subsidies are also a part of some of the scheme of the government. For example, National Food Security Act, you can take it as a part of the central sector scheme. So this combine is going to be further more, but since we have this kind of breakdown, so you can remember it in this way. Now let's move ahead to some numbers and graphs over here, but we'll also look at the concepts. So one is the concept of capital receipt, we will see it over here, and you have the revenue receipt. So what is revenue receipt? Receipt, since we are talking about receipt, that means it is something that you are receiving. Receipt, so something that you are receiving. So what is this revenue and capital? Revenue receipt is that receipt which does not impact your asset liability situation. That means when you get money as revenue receipt, neither your asset will go down nor your liability will increase. No problems whatsoever. So if you are having revenue receipt, it's a very great thing to have amazing amount of revenue receipt. But in capital receipt, what happens is your asset liability situation will be hampered. So when you have capital receipt, either your asset will go down or your liability increases. So the receipt which either reduces your asset or increases your liability is known as capital receipt. Now, why is that not good? Of course it's not good. Why? Because liability increasing means you're taking loan, so you have to pay back. You're required to take loan. So if we don't need any loan, that would be the best thing for India, right? So but we are taking loan, so it increases our liability. Reduction in asset, it is as good as selling of your property. So here we are selling of the PSUs, right? So what happens? PSU, dilution in the PSU, selling of the PSU, our asset goes down. In the future, it is not going to generate revenue to us because we have sold it off, right? So this is the capital receipt. The receipt which either reduces your asset or increases your liability. Revenue receipt, asset does not reduce, liability does not increase, chill, right? So it is quite good. One thing, if you want to remember it generically, revenue receipt is good. Capital receipt, it's going to either increase your liability or reduce your asset. So if you look at both of them are anyhow have increased. So the capital receipt has increased from 16.2 lakh crore to 18.1. Now sometimes some diagrams in the budget and economic survey are quite funny. 16.2 from here to here it is, and 18.1 minus 16.2 is how much? 1.9. This is 1.9 lakh crore, and this entire is 16.2 crore. This only this much is 16.2 crore. They deliberately do it to give a very positive visual effect. It looks as if, wow, this is an amazing increase. But it is good, it is of course good, but it is not as amazing as is visually there. Why I am telling you is because in exams, sometimes we also try to remember things visually. So make sure you look at the number, or else if you are guessing based on the visuals, you may guess it wrong in the examination. Now let's look at the revenue receipt. So revenue receipt has basically, again, you can say there has been a slight increase in the revenue receipt, but capital receipt has increased by a way higher percentage than the revenue receipt increase. So this is somewhere we might have to do better. Now let's move ahead to the revenue expenditure and the capital expenditure. Now we have seen that revenue receipt is good, right? But revenue expenditure is not that good. We have seen the capital receipt is not that good, but the capital expenditure is really good, right? Now that does not mean we should have zero revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure will be there, right? But it's not that good. As good is capital expenditure. Why? Let us see. Revenue expenditure means you are spending money because it is expenditure. Now revenue word is used here. That means it is that expenditure which does not impact the asset liability situation of the government. That means it's an expenditure which neither increases the asset nor lowers the liability. That means it is that expenditure through which you are not buying any asset nor you are paying off any loan. If you look at from your household budget perspective, you can think that when you make an expenditure for going and watching movie, right? It's a revenue expenditure, because when you go watch a movie, do you get any increase in the asset? No. Are you getting any land or house or anything? No. Is your loan getting paid? No. So it's a wasteful kind of an expenditure. But that does not mean, of course, that you should not watch movies. It recreates you, all those things are there. That is why I said we will still have revenue expenditure. It's needed. Is the salaries of the employees, all these things are revenue expenditure. It's needed, but it's not that good. The percentage of it should be lesser as compared to the percentage of capital expenditure, at least proportionately less. The revenue expenditure is very high. We should bring it down a bit, and we should increase our capital expenditure a bit. Okay, so revenue expenditure is the expenditure which does not have effect on the asset liability situation. It neither increases your asset nor lowers your liability. Then you have the capital expenditure. It is an expenditure which increases your asset or reduces your liability. So either you are forming an asset or you are paying off your loan. So that is your capital expenditure, which there has been up and down, but now in budgeted estimate 26-27 it is going to increase. However, if you see, the budgeted estimate of 25-26 was 15.5 lakh crore, but the revised estimate is saying that it will be only 14 lakh crore. So generally that's what happens. All the positive things are estimated on the higher side, all the negative things are estimated on the lower side, and then it happens the other way around generally, right? So anyway, this is what is visible here. If you talk about the revenue expenditure has also increased. However, it's a good thing that budgeted revenue expenditure was said to be higher, but it has been actually lower. So this is a very positive thing, right? And now, but next year, the budgeted estimate for 26-27 is on the higher side. But remember the concept. In fact, in 2025, yes, the last year's prelims, they have asked question with respect to this concept. Let's move ahead. Now let's talk about the net tax revenue, non-tax revenue, non-debt capital receipts. So what we are not taking into consideration, the debt creating capital receipts. Loans are not included here. So let us see. First, the net tax revenue. So how much has the government received through taxes? You can see that there has been a nice amount of increase. So this is good. Then you have the non-tax revenue, revenue from non-tax sources. So this is also been good. As I said, fees, registration fees, etc. are a part of this. Now you have non-debt creating capital receipt. So those capital receipts which do not create any liability for the government. So this had gone down. Now this is again on the rise. Okay, so this has been the trend. Trend is quite important. What is important? You know that, okay, once it went down, then it went up. So if you ask questions like it has continuously increased, right? It has not. So those kind of trends you have to remember. Now this is the total transfer by the central government to the states and union territories. This also the government is showcasing that it has increased over the period of time continuously, right? From 18.7 lakh crore in 22-23, it is estimated that in 26-27 it will be 16.2 lakh crore. So that talks about federalism, or you can say cooperative federalism. between the government of India and the state governments. Okay. Now, next, this is the graph. All this, every infographic is directly from the Ministry of Finance's website, from the highlights of the budget. Okay. Now, here we talk about the expenditure of the major items. So again, numbers as such are not important, but the ranking becomes important. Okay. The UPSC can ask you directly. So first is transportation. Almost you have 6 lakh crore rupees. Then second is defense. So first is transportation, second is defense. These are the two most important things. In transportation, what is happening? Roads, right? Runways, airports, railways. The government has also talked about 20 inland waterways, right? All those things contain, the ports, etc. are being developed. So all these together constitute the transportation. Second is defense. A high amount of percentage is going to defense. Of course, it's required specifically when you look at the fact that the kind of countries that we are surrounded by. On one side you have China, on the other side you have Pakistan, then you have Bangladesh, then you have porous border with Myanmar, which we now creating wall, where we are creating wall now. So because we are surrounded by such countries, our defense expenditure actually goes a lot into ensuring that we keep these countries' people away and ensure that they do not harm our country or infiltrate all those issues that are going on. In spite of that, if that would not have been the case, it still would have been high, but not this high. Why it still would have been high? Because the political boundaries are drawn. We are a nuclear power that gives us the hard power, because of which the countries and the world listens to us. So development is still required, but being surrounded by such countries makes us spend more over here, because of which our expenditure elsewhere reduces, right? Third is the rural development. It is high. It's higher than the development of the urban cities. Why is that the case? Because cities are already developed. The private sector is already developing it. Rural area needs development. That's point number one. Point number two is only 36% people are living in the urban area. That means 64% people are living in the rural area. So almost double the population is living in the rural area, and it needs development. That is why this is over here. Third, then you have the home affairs. In home affairs means the home ministry takes care of, for example, the internal security, etc. So there also expenditure will be required. Then you have agriculture and allied activities. Then finally we have education, right? Why I said finally? Because in education we aspire to spend more. We want to spend about 5% of our GDP in education. We are not quite close to that target, but hopefully in the future we will be. Then you have new energy. Specifically, the government is focusing on nuclear energy, and of course our focus on renewable energy is anyhow there. But remember, economic survey talked about issues that are being faced by the renewable energy. What are the issues being faced? There is a huge amount of metals that are required. For solar energy, for wind energy, you need tons and tons of silver for 1 gigawatt, tons and tons of aluminium, copper, etc., which is a hurdle. And the government is also focusing on nuclear energy as well. The Shanti scheme, which has come in nuclear energy, that can be linked over here. Then you have expenditure on health. Then comes urban development. It is 1/3 of the rural development. Then IT and telecom, commerce and industry, social welfare, right? Scientific departments, tax administration, and the external affairs. Now, external affair ministry also spends a lot. There are a lot of trips, tours, visits, conferences, etc. Now, many people criticize it as a vacation. Sometimes that might be the case, because these ministers, etc., they are not traveling alone. They have their entire family. Recently, certain videos like that was circulating, wherein their family members are enjoying life in foreign countries, wherein only the minister was required to do the actual work. But they also do the actual work as well. When we visit different countries, when we hold conferences, when we reach out to the leaders and visit, there is a different impetus that is there, which helps us to get deals done, which helps us to get certain leverages. So that also plays a very, very important role. Now, let us have a look at the trend in the tax receipts. So here we have the gross tax receipts. Gross means this will include both the direct taxes and the indirect taxes. Remember, I have told you direct taxes are progressive in nature, indirect taxes are regressive in nature. So ideally, the composition of direct taxes should be higher and indirect taxes should be lower. Let us see what the case is. So if we look at the direct taxes, so direct taxes, if you see in 2019-20, direct taxes was higher than the indirect taxes, which is shown in yellow. But in 2020-21, direct taxes increased, indirect taxes increased and direct taxes were less. See, one reason could be because of the COVID year, the production etc. was down, so the corporates etc. were not earning much. Income tax incomes were also down. People were digging deep into their savings, but spending was still there because you still need the basic things. So that can be one of the reasons. But from 2021-22, the direct taxes started becoming more, and it has been more. In fact, the indirect taxes have started becoming lesser and lesser, and they are deviating. They are going away from each other. So this is slightly increasing, this is slightly decreasing, creating more gap between the two. This is something that is good. This situation helps the poor, right? Because indirect taxes, which are regressive in nature, are on the lower side, correct? So so that is going to help. The tax which gives more burden on the poor are lesser. The tax which gives more burden on the rich are more in percentage, as you can see over here. So that is a good movement over here. Now next, let us have a look at the capital expenditure. Capex basically means the capital expenditure. Now, if you talk about the capital expenditure should be high. We should be aspiring to have it more and more, because capital expenditure, when done, it creates assets, and assets generates revenue for us in the future. So let us see what is the situation here. So as you can see, the capital expenditure has generally increased only, be it the capital expenditure or the effective capital expenditure or grant in aid capital expenditure. So grant in aid capital expenditure means those grants that has been used as capital expenditure has also increased from 1.9 to 4.9. The capital expenditure from 3.4 to 12.2. It's a high number, and effective means the combination of the two is further, of course, higher from 5.2 to 17.1. I believe the figures are in lakh crores. Yes, the figures here are in lakh crores. So this is again a good indicator. I hope that's clear. So we have so far seen all the macroeconomic indicators, the receipts, the expenditure, the tax, non-tax revenue, everything. Now in this budget also certain schemes are announced, certain allocations are announced, and certain things are announced for different sectors. Now let us have a look at these things as well. So first is energy transition and security. India aspires to have energy security, especially in a world wherein there are huge amount of conflicts that are going out throughout the world. For example, Israel bombing Gaza, Iran bombing Israel, USA in return bombing Iran. Then you have Russia-Ukraine conflict. You have so many things going on as we speak, and then USA entering Venezuela. All these things are happening. Now, if you look at the countries, Iran, Russia, or Venezuela, these are countries which has crude oil, shale gas, which provides energy. So when we buy energy from these countries, it gives us energy security. But if there are so much of geopolitical instability, that threatens our energy security dimension, right? At the same time, we want to move from non-renewable energy to renewable energy. So this is the transition we have to make. And because of geopolitical tension, we need to ensure our energy security, right? So in this regard, what the government has done, there is basic custom duty exemption. Custom duty exemption means, see, this is our country, right? So now when the goods come in our country, basically, okay, so we impose custom duties on those goods, right? Why do we impose custom duties? So that the goods become costly and we demand less of those goods, so that our industry is protected, so that we demand more goods of our own industry. That is why it is there. But sometimes for certain things, the government exempts these custom duties. For example, you are importing certain goods using which you are going to produce renewable energy. Then the government will say, if you are doing that, you will be exempted from the custom duty. So that was the situation with respect to the capital goods that are used for manufacturing of lithium ion battery, that we famously call as Lion or Leon battery, lithium ion battery. For its manufacturing, if you are importing capital goods, the custom duty was exempted. That means you didn't have to pay it. Now that time period up to which it was exempted is coming to an end. So this budget says that we will extend that timeline. All right. So what is the thing here? Extension of the exemption that was given. So it is about to end. Now the government has exempted that custom duty exemption. Right. Next, let us look at what has happened in indirect taxes. So as I said, the government, along with the ease of doing business, said that they are also focusing on ease of living. So how are they focusing on ease of living? It is said that, see, when we import goods, so if we import goods for our personal use, you are not doing business from it, you're not making money from it, you are wanting it for your own personal use in your household for yourself. In that case, the government said that they will reduce the import duties from present 20% to 10%. Correct? So this will ensure ease of living. In addition to that, the custom duty on 17 drug and medicines will also be exempted. So this is also good, right? Duties on the drugs being exempted, it will help the patients as well. Next, if you look at indirect taxes, again, custom duty exemption for what? The components and parts that are required for manufacturing civilian, training and other aircraft. So you have civilian aircraft. Civilian aircraft means the aircraft that will carry the civilian passengers, citizens from one place to another. Then you have the training aircraft, the aircraft in which the training is provided to the pilots, and other aircrafts as well. So on that also there is custom duty exemption that the government is talking about. Moving ahead, talking about empowering Divyangjans, right? The specially abled people. So here the government is talking about two different schemes. First is the Divyangjan Kaushal Yojana. Now, see, of course, in the exams that does happen, the fact that Kaushal. Now, Kaushal is a Hindi word which basically means skill. So someone who's well versed in Hindi will be able to understand that. So to some extent there will be some amount of biasness in the wording, which knowingly, unknowingly is a different thing, but we do face that. So we need to know the translation. If you simply know this translation, you can know what will it all be about, right? If you don't know, it will be difficult. So some of the students who know Hindi, they can guess it, whereas others cannot. So that lacuna, we need to, ensure that the UPSC fills this lacuna. Anyway, let's move ahead with this Divyangjan Kaushal Yojana. Kaushal, as I said, means skill. So this is talking about developing the skill. Yojana, of course, means scheme. So this is talking about developing skill for the differently abled people. And the second is Divyangjan Sahara Yojana. Sahara basically means support, to give support. Now, in Divyangjans, when people are specially able, they may have locomotory disability, for example. Their movements might be restricted. So here we are talking about Artificial Limb Manufacturing Corporation of India. So manufacturing the artificial limbs that can help the Divyangjans in their movement, in their locomotive capacity. Then you have investment in education. So when you talk about the investment in education, 5 university townships will be created. Where? Near the major industrial and logistics corridor. Why near major industries and logistics corridors? Because the aim of the government is to convert education into jobs. This is what the government wants. In addition to this, one specific thing for the girls is one girl hostel will be established, not one throughout the country, of course, one girl hostel in every district in higher education STEM institution. So minimum one girls hostel in every district will be established. Is that clear? Let's move ahead. Then you have Khelo India Mission. Now Khelo India Mission, of course, as the name suggests, Khelo means play. So Play India Mission, basically that means it will be related to what? It will be related to sports. So here we are talking about integrated talent development. We are also talking about training of the coaches. Somewhere here they've mentioned, yes, development of the coaches and support staff. Very, very important. Good coach is also very important. Now, right now, for example, in football, there is a rise of good coach. One single coach, of course, but from one only is what we start, right? So do read about him also. He has achieved a lot for Indian football. So we are talking about development of good coaches as well, and integration of sports science and technology. Very, very important. Now, 20 years, or you can say 50 years back, the science and technology involvement in the sports was quite less. Now the sports is also so data driven that you need those technology in the sports to excel, or else you will be left behind. It is almost a certainty. Right. Next is with respect to agriculture, the government is talking about increasing farmers' income. Now, long back, the government has talked about doubling of the farmers' income. When the government said that we will double farmers' income, the farmers asked, which income will you double? Right? Why am I saying this? Because there is an issue with respect to the farmers' income or the minimum support price. When you talk about, there is a concept of minimum support price. What is this minimum support price? The government before the sowing season comes up with a list of crops and their respective minimum support price. For example, last year the minimum support price for rice was rupees 23 per kg. That means if I am a farmer, I grow rice and I want to sell it in the market. In the market, I am not able to sell it at more than 20 rupees per kg. So I can simply reach out to the government and the government will procure my rice at a minimum of rupees 23 per kg. So that actually used to help the farmers. But the issue was, how do you calculate this rupees 23? The government calculates using the formula, the minimum support price equals 1.5 times the production cost, which is good. 50% more than the production cost. But the issue here was, what is production cost? Production cost, the government took it to be A2 plus FL. A2 is basically all the expenditure that you do for seeds, for chemical fertilizers, etc., for hired labor also. And what is FL? FL is basically the family labor. So if you have, let's say, some small amount of land, so only the family of 4, let's say, are able to cultivate it. So that money also you need to take into consideration, because that is also an expenditure, right? But if you have a bigger farmland, then you yourself might be working and hiring labor as well. Or you may not work, only hire the labor. But the point is, there would be some amount of family labor involved. So when you are calculating the production cost, it included A2 plus FL, which was family labor. Now, what is the issue in this? The issue in this is, the farmers do not agree with this calculation. They say the production cost should be A2 plus FL, which you have said, this is good. But in addition to this, please also give us C2. What is C2? This is the opportunity cost that is foregone on the land and the assets that is owned by the farmer. For example, if I am a farmer, I own a land, I am doing farming on this. I could have used this land for something else, but I cannot. I am not using it. So the amount that I am earning is now foregone because I am doing farming. as a result of which that component should be included here is what the farmers say. But the government has till now not added it. Not just the farmers, in fact in 2004, the MS Swaminathan committee, who is known, MS Swaminathan, who is known as the father of Indian Green Revolution. So in 2004, MS Swaminathan committee also recommended the calculation to be done in this way, but the government still does not do it, as a result of which the farmers have protested multiple times. But here, back we are, the government talking about increasing farmers' income, but the calculation is still remaining the same. But anyway, the government is trying to increase the income through other means, through other kind of support, which is also good enough. So they are talking about initiative of integrated development of 500 reservoirs and Amrit Sarovars. Reservoirs means the water reservoirs, the reservoirs of water to provide irrigation facility. Then you have entrepreneurship development in animal husbandry, that means with respect to livestock. Very important. There is higher growth in livestock than the growth in the agricultural crops. So that is why it is a very important thing. In fact, the earning from livestock, animal husbandry ensures certainty of payment for the farmers. And when you grow or rear the livestock animals on the farmland along with agriculture, it is, remember, it's known as mixed farming, not mixed cropping. Mixed cropping is when you grow two or more than two crop. If you grow it with row arrangement, without row arrangement, that's mixed cropping. Mixed farming is agriculture plus livestock rearing. Then you have the concept of Bharat Vistar. Vistar means to expand the ambit of something. So Bharat Vistar, this is virtually integrated system to access agricultural resources. Like for example, for you have your own Legacy IAS Academy portal where you can log in and have the access to all the things that you need for your UPSC. In the same manner, this will be a portal, multilingual portal, multiple languages. That's a very good thing. It's not just in Hindi and English. It will also have regional languages as well. So in this portal, you will have access to all the resources, all the information that you need to carry out your agriculture in the most efficient manner possible. Next, fiscal consolidation and budget estimates, very, very important. So when you're talking about the fiscal consolidation, as I said, when you're talking about fiscal consolidation, you want to bring down the fiscal deficit. You basically want to bring down the debt that you have. So let us see what is the situation of this and what we would be doing in the future. So if you talk about debt to GDP ratio, whenever you say ratio, what is this? One thing upon the other. So you are talking about debt to GDP ratio. That means debt upon GDP, right? What is debt upon GDP? It is estimated that it will be debt to GDP ratio estimated to be 55.6%. 55.6%. Correct? Another way to say that is debt. Another way will be over here that debt is equals to 0.556 times into the GDP of the country. Now this is what is estimated. Compared to what? In 2025-26, this debt to GDP ratio was 56.1. So debt to GDP ratio was worse previous year, and it has, or better way to say is that it has become better in this particular fiscal year, or it will be better in the coming fiscal year. 2026 is basically, of course, the coming fiscal year, so it will be better in the coming fiscal year, which is a good thing for India. But remember, it is still 55% of the GDP. That means it is quite high. Yes, it looks high, but let me tell you one thing. If you compare it with other countries, with the Western countries, we are still better. Let's see why. So we are saying that our debt to GDP ratio in the coming fiscal will be 55.6%. You know how much is for Italy? Italy has 127% debt to GDP ratio. You have countries like USA and other Western countries whose debt to GDP ratio is way beyond 100%. So if you compare it with them, we are actually doing well, and we are anyhow going to do better. Now let's come to the fiscal deficit. So the budgeted estimate for fiscal deficit is 4.3%. That means in 2026-27, our fiscal deficit will be 4.3% of what? Of GDP. How much is it going to be this fiscal? In the fiscal 2025-26, it will be 4.4%. So we have managed to keep it within 4.5%, and next year it is going to further reduce, which is a good thing. However, as I mentioned, according to the FRBM Act, our fiscal deficit should be 3% or less than that. But as I said, during COVID, it shot up and we are trying to control it now. Then you have new road to ease of living. So as I had talked about, the decrease in the custom duty for things which are required for personal use. There are certain further reductions over here. So if you look at reduction of the TCS, TCS is what? Tax deducted basically at the source, right? Or tax calculated at the source over here. So on the sale of the overseas tour program package, so overseas tour program package that is there, so that was also charged at 5% and 20%. Both of them have now been reduced to 2% only without any stipulated amount. Means it is not subject to any amount or limit on the expenditure. All right. Next, with respect to direct taxes. Now, what India is saying is that we will give certain companies tax holidays till 2047. That means up to 2047. How many years are left? Still 21 years are left. So up to 2047, we will give tax holidays. That means we will not tax them. Why will we not tax them? We want more companies to come do business, invest. Our foreign indirect investment FPIs are flying away from India. We want more investments in India. So we are ready to give them tax holidays up to 2047. If they basically provide what you call it as cloud services, for companies providing cloud services, right, by procuring data center services in India. So if there is a company which provides cloud services by procuring data centers services in India, right, so if they are establishing that in India, then only we will give them tax holidays up to 2047, right? Then you have next about creating champion SMEs and supporting micro enterprises. SMEs means small and medium enterprises, and here you have micro. So in totality, what you're talking about, MSMEs. So what the government is saying, the government is trying to provide equity support. Dedicated 10,000 crore worth of growth fund is there, plus the self-reliant fund that is there, the government is going to add 2,000 crore rupees additional on that. Top up, like you top up your mobile phone recharge, you have done top up of 100 rupees, you add another 20 rupees, so it becomes 120. In the same manner, there is a self-reliant fund on which the government is now going to add another 2,000 crore rupees over there. Then you have building infrastructure for future ready Bharat. So here we are talking about the seaplane VGF scheme. VGF scheme is what? Viability gap funding. Now what is this viability gap funding? See, if you start certain project, this viability gap funding is also there in your renewable energy sector. So if you want to start project in renewable energy sector or the seaplane business is what you want to start, now when you start it, you may have some money, but some of the money you might require, right? And initially the businesses will not start making profit. For some duration of time, you might have to run that business in a loss, no profit, no loss. The break even will come later. So you may not have that much of money, as a result of which your project or your business will not be viable. Viable means not possible. So to make it possible, so as to provide the viability, the government is coming up with the seaplane viability gap funding scheme, right? So basically funds will be provided over there. Then the government is talking about creating 20 new national waterways. So it is basically the inland national waterways that the government is talking about. What is inland waterways? Utilizing the river system for transportation of goods, etc. Right? Then 7 high-speed rail corridors we have already seen, right? Pune, Mumbai, then you have Hyderabad, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, Chennai, so on and so forth. Then you have next carbon capture, utilization and storage. So there is a technology of carbon capture and sequestration. You capture the carbon from the atmosphere, you sequester in the ground so as to reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. But that sequestration, inserting that back into the soil, we don't know what it will do in the future. In the future, all of the carbon can burst out together, so that's an issue. So here we are simply talking about carbon capture, and after capture we are not talking about sequestration alone, we are saying utilization and storage. So we are going to utilize that in other things, in other processes which needs carbon. So this basically, this CCUS technology is going to be scaled in order to ensure more and more of this carbon can be captured and utilized. It will be done in 5 industrial sectors. Those are power, steel, cement, etc. Right? So all these sectors you will be given this facilitation of these technologies. Then you have reforms across the financial sector. So as we have already discussed that there will be high level committee on banking for Vikasit Bharat. What will this committee do? This committee is going to review the banking system in India. Then in a similar way, there is high powered education to employment and enterprise standing committee. That means this is also a high powered committee, but what is this for? This is for education to employment and enterprise. Means from education, how do you get the job? From education, how should the education be converted into job and enterprises and businesses? What this committee is going to talk about and give recommendations. So this is actually quite a good thing that is happening, right? And then the government has a target that we become leaders in services with around 10% of the global share by 2047. But remember, this 2047 is still 21 years ahead, so you may not be able to visualize it that much, and the government can also at times give vague targets, etc. So the target is also should be for short term, near medium term or near future, so that we also can understand whether it is being achieved or not. However, even a long term goal, you can check year on year, are we on track or not. But of course, this long-term goal of 2047 should be broken down into small steps in order to see how we are doing and what more we need to do. Then you have the expanding the economy through strengthening tourism. So here, what has happened here is, before COVID, this was the amount of tourism that India had. But in COVID, it of course fell. But subsequent to COVID, it started increasing, and it had actually till very recently not reached the pre-COVID level. Now it is reaching the pre-COVID level. Now we want to do furthermore, as a result of which we are facilitating tourism. Now India holds specific strength when it comes to medical tourism. That too with respect to, let's say, cutting edge technology, especially people coming from Bangladesh and stuff in India to get the use of technology and get their operations done. But in addition to that, we also have medical tourism with respect to Ayush ministry, that is Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha, homeopathy, etc. So you have the scheme to support the states for establishing 5 regional medical hubs. We are talking about medical value tourism in Ayush industry. So this is Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani, Siddha, homeopathy. That is what Ayush is all about. Then you have orange economy, boosting India's AVGC sector. This is basically animation, video, graphic, gaming and comics. So this is majorly related to your gaming, right? Animation, visual effects, gaming and comics sector. This is what is the full form of AVGC. So here it is estimated that the AVGC sector will require around 2 million professionals by 2030. So if you have your younger brother or a younger sister who might be, let's say, in 10th, 12th standards, this is also a good sector to work in, because this sector is going to develop further. Gaming sector is going to develop further. It's not just gaming, of course. It is basically animation, visual effects, gaming, and the comics sector that we are talking about. So because there will be so much of requirement as such, as a result of which there will be support system, the institutes that will be created to develop these people, to train them, educate them in this, and come up with the content creator labs in 15,000 secondary schools and 500 colleges. So 15,000 schools and 500 colleges will have these AVGC content creator labs, which will develop the skills in the people in order to get the jobs in the future, because there is going to be huge requirement. Then talking about strengthening the healthcare sector, so All India Institute of Ayurveda, like we have the All India Institute of Medical Science, aims in the same manner. All India Institute of Ayurveda, total 3 new will be established. Then around 1 lakh allied health professionals will be inducted over the next 5 years. Then you have Biopharma Shakti. This Biopharma Shakti is basically strategy for healthcare advancement through knowledge, technology, and innovation. So here we are talking about the production of the medicines. India want to produce medicine and become the hub for the medical production. That is what we aspire to. And then you have finally the textile sector, wherein we are coming up with 2 schemes. One is Mahatma Gandhi Gram Swaraj initiative, which is going to be launched to strengthen what? Khadi handloom and the handicrafts, right? So Khadi handloom and handicraft, these are the 2 things under this particular scheme. Then you have Samarth 2.0. This will be to modernize the textile skilling ecosystem. Samarth means to become capable, someone who is capable, someone who is able. So how do you make them Samarth? When you are talking about upgrading their skilling. So you will be becoming capable means you will be having that skill. So like this, with the translation of the word itself, you can remember what the scheme is actually all about, and this will be in your textile sector. So all in all, now if you have to see how the budget was, so see, the GST 2.0 reforms had already taken place in September 2025, which was a big reform already taken place. The liberalization of the tax slabs, more relief was given to the middle class to some extent, which was also mentioned in previous year's budget, which will be implemented from 1st of April, from the coming, not the 1st of April, it has been implemented from 1st of April 2025, but now we will start filing the income tax. So now it will get into effect actually, right? So this was also mentioned in the previous budget. So the important things either happened in the previous budget, important as in the things which were sort of a relief for the middle class, etc., tax relief, or the GST reform which happened outside the budget in September, it was implemented. So all these things had already happened. So the expectation was still created, the hype was still created, but it's not a surprise that this budget does not have huge things in store for, let's say, the middle class people or for any specific industry or specific sections of the society. It's basically a usual kind of a budget which just tries to ensure that we are doing well with respect to our macro economic factors, that is our GDP growth rate, our inflation, or you talk about the different deficits or the collection of revenue, the collection of taxes. It tries to ensure that our fiscal deficit is less, our debt to GDP ratio goes down. So it has focused a lot on that. But still, some of the schemes that are coming up are going to be good, right? But as such, not an out of the box or out of the ordinary thing that we can see. However, as and when these announcements gets implemented, the rules, the guidelines and details come, we will also come up with the sessions in order to tell you about those things as well. Now, before I end this, very important thing as to how to use this document and also your economic survey. These documents should not just be used as a factual thing. Of course, the trends, etc., can be asked in your prelims. The concepts that I've taught you can be asked in prelims. But the things, the phrases that are used, especially in the economic survey, etc., can be directly quoted in your exams. The reasons that are given by the budget, by the economic survey, in the finance minister's budget speech, all that can be quoted in your answers. All those things can be asked to you as a question as well. So you can write what is written in these documents. We will also be coming up with chapter-specific economic survey detailing, and the summaries of budget and economic survey will also be released. So, as I said, economic survey is a 739-page document, too much to read, so you can read the summary. Budget also, it's full of numbers as well, so we clear the clutter and bring you what is required. So make sure you read the summary, which will be released soon. All right, I hope you have understood everything. If you have any doubts, you can ask here also in the comment sections. You can reach out to us for any clearance or for any clarification of any doubts that you may be having. I hope you learned something out of this session which you can specifically utilize for your UPSC prelims preparation. Thank you.